Well, I consider myself a folklorist, and I got very interested in folklore, especially regarding sort of magical folklore when I was very young. And over the years became very interested in the sort of the modern interpretations of this, which came sort of Wicca and Neo-Paganism. I was involved with the Museum of Witchcraft in Boscastle since the mid-90s, and I've written a couple of books on the subject as well. That sort of very much sort of honed my interest in that sort of particular area. But one of the things that absolutely fascinates me about it is that, especially regarding Wicca and modern paganism, is that it's such a many-headed beast. There are so many different interpretations to it, and it's very many different, and it's a constantly changing thing. I sort of look around at sort of the world of Wicca and paganism now, and think of it, what it was when I first sort of became aware of this, back in the 1980s. And I think, sort of, I think how much it's changed in so many ways. Artifacts, to me, are physical embodiments of story. They're physical objects, but the only thing that gives them meaning and life is the story, the narrative that's enshrined within them. Artifacts they only exist within a context, within a particular belief. And I mean, you mentioned sort of protection rune talisman you got. I mean, this would have been in a society where these runes were seen as a sort of physical embodiment of their relationship with a particular aspect of the divine, that would, these little angular inscriptions would have been imbued with power and would have very real influences on people's lives. And that's the context that gives the little object you got meaning. I've known this is definitely the sort of the case with the Museum of Witchcraft up in Boscastle, is you do start getting quite a relationship with that personal relationship with the objects. And it's not just the objects individually, it's when the objects come together, they almost make a kind of almost like a little museum ecosystem of artifacts in themselves, in the way that they relate to each other. Something dealing with these artifacts, you do sometimes get activity with them. And I always keep some holy water from an old Cornish holy well there with them, just as a safety sort of thing. And every morning I go round with incense around the place, and I say hello to everything, and I give everything an incense which sort of cleanses and generally settles the place. And I say, I say hello to the old old Cecil Williamson, who was the original proprietor of the Museum of Witchcraft. I've got an enormous amount of respect for. He's no longer with us for many years, but I've got a photograph of him on the wall, and I always give him a hello in the morning. The thing about a museum is it's a physical thing. It's a physical space. And this is one of the reasons I really like it. In our digital age, people just aren't used to being in a physical space. And you go in a museum, you go around and you're physically moving through the space, and you're physically looking at these physical objects in another physical space. But you're moving all the time, and your mind's moving. It's not a static thing. I guess I would describe myself in many ways as an animist. I mean, I believe all things have spirit and living spirit, and in honouring the spirits all around you, it makes you honour the world and other people as well. And it gives you a sense of respect for the world, I think, and also it's quite a humbling thing as well. And it's funny, all these things in other cultures are all considered very normal. That's the sort of thing you do. But in our culture, we tend not to do these things. I think it's a bit of a loss. These are very nice things to do. Well, a lot of this, I think, actually comes not from a disregard for paganism, but it comes from the Protestant Reformation. When we decided, when we rejected Catholicism, and it's sort of continued from there on in. And a lot of the things were considered Catholic, which were things like the use of incense, holy water, daily spiritual practices in your home, sort of communing with the dead and the spirits, even if they were in the form of the saints. And all this sort of thing continued. And I think we've still got a sort of real antipathy, which goes, 500 years back to this time of the Protestant Reformation, where I think we're very hardwired to sort of feel very suspicious of these things. And it's a shame. I think a lot of these practices have got a lot to offer. It was Gerald Gardner, very interesting character. He lived overseas for many years in the Far East, where he witnessed a lot of sort of tribal practices, and I think he started getting interested in the idea that these ancient tribal practices might still exist in the British Isles. And this tied in at the same time. There was a lady called Dr. Margaret Murray who came up with this theory that witchcraft was a survival of some ancient tribal practices that somehow survived through into the modern age. Gerald Gardner was very inspired by this, and he came back and as you say, sort of late 40s, 50s, started reviving this idea of Wicca. But we say Gerald Gardner, I always think there were other people involved in it as well, and it always tends to be, I think, in a movement you get the charismatic guy at the front who everybody knows about, but I strongly suspect that there were other people, movers and shakers, doing it as well. Yeah, and he sort of carried on, and various other people. Doreen Valiente is another name. He got involved in very much in this revival. And then in the 70s you get the Alexander's. He very much got in with the zeitgeist of sort of swinging London, and prior to that it was very much a thing of the upper middle classes, sort of Wicca, and it was he was a colonial man, Gerald Gardner. Up until sort of quite recently, these streams of initiation were very important, and often you get people who were initiated, Gardnerians, would know their lineage. And likewise with Alexanders, again, sort of it tend to be either sort of Gardnerian, within Wicca you tend to get Gardnerians or Alexandrians, or mixtures of the two. And a lot of them were very aware of their exact line of initiation, and they could tell you exactly who it was. But in the 90s there was a big change. We get the sort of revival of what's called the old craft, or the traditional craft, and these were areas of witchcraft which weren't Gardnerian or weren't Alexandrian, and it tends to be, it's a right mishmash. It's loads of different stuff. It's basically all the traditions that weren't those two traditions. And this sort of started gathering a pace. So now you get, and this seems to be a very big thing now, this traditional witchcraft, or old craft as it's sometimes known, which is this sort of non-Gardnerian or non-Alexandrian. But in my mind it's all such a great big cauldron where everything's mixed up anyway. It's a very old book. This is the oldest bit of town up here, the old High Street, and this is, I reckon, about 1850s, this building, and at the top it's sort of early 1700s at the far end. But yeah, it's a lovely old building. It's an ideal place for it. The main activity I have had here, I've had to deal with, is, before this was a museum, it was a bar. And the story was that sort of a downstairs bar was haunted by a sailor who had he had a penchant for the ladies. He used to touch up the ladies, apparently. And anyway, the bar, closed. It unfortunately didn't make it through the lockdown, and I took over as a museum. Now I never come across a sailor ghost down there, but what did happen was I was having poltergeist activity. The bottom lights were being turned on at night, and this was happening regularly. Once a week, twice a week, and there's no one else has any access to this building apart from me. And I have, as you can see, I've got a lot of cabinets with lights on, and I have a regime every night. I go through very methodically each one in turn, turning them off. So another same order I do it in, just so I don't miss any out. And what I do is I go through the whole of the bottom floor, and then I turn off the main light, and then I look round and I can see if I left any of the lights on. So I know 110% I turn the bottom light off. And sure enough, I'd come in the morning and the light would be on. It was, it's one of these things you sort of get used to. And I said, when you're sort of aware of this sort of spirit presence, it becomes, it's just part of your world. And what I did, I put gaffer tape over the light switch, and it works. So gaffer tape is ghost proof. But it's interesting sometimes. I think often with these otherworldly problems, sometimes you can overcomplicate them, and sometimes it's a very simple solution sorts things out. A little bit of tape over your light switch. Got the Cecil Williamson book of witchcraft, which was sort of about Cecil Williamson, the founder of the Museum of Witchcraft up in Boscastle, but it's much broader. It's about his researches into the early old craft. Yeah. He initially set up the Isle of Man Museum with Gerald Gardner, and the two men fell out quite badly. And Gerald Gardner was intent on Wicca and forming Wicca, and he was kind of, in a way, he was forward-looking. He wanted to develop Wicca into a world religion, which, in a sense, is what's happened. Cecil Williamson was the other way around. He was very backwards and inward-looking, and he saw the old magical traditions as something very insular and secret. He called it the silent world of witchcraft, and it wasn't supposed to be in the public gaze. Yeah. And I think he thought magic itself wouldn't, if it was brought into the public gaze, it would transform into something very different. And I think he was right. It was this, you look at the way a lot of modern Neo-Paganism has gone, and it's very glitzy and commercial, and I think he foresaw all that sort of thing coming, and no, it's not supposed to be like that.